Hi everyone, these are the books I read in January. I had a pretty decent reading month in January, I think because I started off with such a great book, and I actually started this book around Christmas, but I ended up finishing it on January 1st, so it still counts, and it is Beauty by Hubert, or Beauté by Hubert. It's a translated graphic novel, and I gave it 5 stars. My friend actually gave me this book for Christmas and I was so grateful. I really had to give her a big thank you because it was such a good book. It was probably my favorite graphic novel that I've read so far. It was really nice art, not like amazing art, it's very stylized European type of comic book art, but the main character was so stupid. It's kind of like fairy tale based, almost like Cinderella, but not really. It's about this young woman who's a peasant and she's really ugly. She's like the ugliest person in the town, and she saves a little fairy, and the fairy grants her a wish, and she of course wishes to become the most beautiful woman in the world or wherever, and so all the guys are after her, and she ends up marrying a duke and then marrying, well, I don't want to give you spoilers, but all these crazy hijinks happen because of her looks, and the story was funny and like scary, and there was so much character development in it, which I find doesn't happen a lot for certain graphic novels or comics. They're sometimes lacking in character development, but just everything really came together in this book, and it was one of those books where as soon as I finished reading it, I just went back to the first page and started rereading it because it was so good. The next book I read was The Book of Ivy by Amy Engel, and I saw someone talking about this on YouTube, and I just took it out from the library because the audiobook happened to be like ready. So this is a young adult book. It's a dystopian, and I ended up giving this book 1 star because I hated it so goddamn much. I really have a hard time with young adult novels. I've been trying to go into them with an open mind, you know, telling myself this is a young adult novel, it's going to be romance heavy, and stuff like that, but it just doesn't help me at all. I just thought the story was really, really weak. The plot was weak. There was almost no character development, and the whole dystopian setting was just this empty, meaningless shell for like this marriage that happened, which is not a spoiler, it happens in like the first page. So also I'm kind of getting tired of these dystopian young adult novels. They're just like what's hip now. It's like what happened with Twilight, with the explosion of vampire novels now happening after the Hunger Games, all the dystopian novels. Yeah, so overall I hated that book. It's a series, of course, because you can't have young adult without making it a trilogy at least, so I definitely will not be continuing that book on. I was so happy when it was over. And the book I read after that was a nonfiction book called Endurance: Shackleton's Incredible Voyage, written by Alfred Lansing. I gave this book 3 stars, and overall it's fairly interesting. I kind of expected it to be more interesting. There were certain parts that kind of felt like they were skimming over some interesting things, like there wasn't a ton of characterization, which I understand it's nonfiction and maybe there just wasn't the information there to give the characters that life. I didn't feel like I got to know any of the characters or real people that existed at all, so overall it was really interesting. I really enjoy survival stories, so I liked it in that way, but I probably wouldn't read it again. And then the last book I read was Tiny Beautiful Things: Advice on Love and Life from Dear Sugar by Cheryl Strayed. And you may know that name because it is the author of Wild. It's a really popular book right now because the movie for it just came out. I ended up giving this book 5 stars. It was absolutely amazing. I know from the title it kind of sounds like one of those goofy self-help books, which I don't normally read. I have read a few, but this book wasn't really like that at all. It was so smart and poignant. It's basically Cheryl Strayed used to work as a advice columnist. Well, I guess she volunteered because she wasn't paid, but basically like an online advice columnist, and people would write in with basically the worst thing that has ever happened to them in their lives, and then she would give them advice on it, and oftentimes she would also answer with an anecdote from her life as well, and it was so insightful, it was so witty, and there was parts that were just devastating, there was like funny parts, and I loved how she wasn't afraid to tell the people who wrote into her that they were just being a brat. And I got this book out from the library, but I'm definitely going to be buying it because there were several parts that I really wanted to highlight, so I could go back and look at them later. So I'll definitely be buying that, and I actually think I'll buy Cheryl Strayed's other 2 books because her writing was just that good. I really want to read her other work. That's everything I finished last month. I'm currently reading The Prince Lestat by Anne Rice. I think I'm about like a fifth of the way through it, and I have a few books coming up that I'm really looking forward to, including Amy Poehler's book. So yeah, that's what I'm going to be reading this month. Please tell me what you thought of any of the books I mentioned and what you're reading this month down below in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye! Years ago, let's just add it to the list. Remember to add it to this list in 2014. Which is a graphic novel. It's done by my friend. Check it out. It's good.